Hey everybody, it's Eric Dorward here with Spartan Rocketry Club, and today we are going to be starting a new build. We are going to be working on the Estes Pro Series. So this is a mid-powered rocket, the Black Brant 12. So something to look forward to. So this kit is, well, it's pretty elaborate. I've already begun some of the work. There is a lot to do. And because it's mid-powered, that means that this rocket will be flying on 29 millimeter motors, which is significantly bigger than the typical 18. Impulse, we're going to look at E and F sized motors. 29 millimeter motors of that size, Estes, that's about as big as they make, and they're black powder. But it's also big enough that we might end up using composite fuel to make this thing fly as well. And in that scale, 29 millimeter motor could easily get into the G range. Now, because we're talking about a bigger rocket, because we're talking about a heavier rocket, and a whole lot more impulse, total thrust, and all that, that means the construction techniques we're going to use are going to be different. Now, this rocket in particular still uses balsa, which is kind of surprising. And you would expect, honestly, something maybe stronger than that, maybe plywood. But this is as thick as the balsa is that we're going to be looking at here. So I've prepped most of this already. Same usual business applies here. And I'm not going to actually put too much effort into sanding this down because in order to make up for the fact that we're using balsa still, which is, let's face it, it's not super strong, we are going to be laminating some of this. So essentially, we're going to be making our own plywood. Why we're using balsa still when we could be just using straight up plywood to begin with, I'm not entirely sure why the good people at Estes chose to make this out of pretty surprisingly thick balsa. I don't know. Because, so this series, the Pro Series 2, anyway, has been, I don't know, it's been available for a while. And I have a few rockets that are from this line that used plywood. But the kits they've designed recently have not, for whatever reason. And that's fine. I don't know. There are some benefits to using plywood over balsa, strength being one of them. Expense too. Balsa is surprisingly expensive when you get it in sheets this thick. And since we're essentially just making making plywood out of what we had to begin with anyway, I don't know. I'm not completely sure why they made the choices they did, but it's fine. So anyway, since we are making plywood, essentially, some of the fins for this, in fact, all the wood fins anyway, we're going to laminate them. We're going to glue multiple sheets of balsa together. And since we're going to do that, some of the faces are going to be inside, so they're not going to get exposed to the outside. And in addition to that, to make the fins, we're actually going to pretty heavily bevel. We're going to heavily bevel them, which means that a lot of the finishing techniques that we would be using anyway wouldn't really make much of a difference because all that work is going to get erased by the heavy amounts of sanding that need to get done. The other thing that we're going to have to do for this is, I'll show you here momentarily once I get these pieces cut out. Oh yeah, that's pretty well in there. Anyway, a lot of the pieces are of this nice blown injected plastic. So we're going to have to process this soon. This particular X-Acto blade's probably on its last legs. I'm going to need a new one when I switch over to cutting through the plastic, which is a fairly major undertaking as well. The other major thing that we have not done yet in a video, or I have not done yet in a video like this, I have done it, but not in a video, is how we're going to attach these things. There we go. And there are two reasons that we're going to be making major changes. One is wood glue is perfectly fine if you're using a small 18 millimeter rocket motor. It's fine. It really is. The worst, the most thrust you generally get out of a black powder motor, and this kit included, is so an A8. So that's 8. That's like the maximum thrust that the rocket experiences. It's not exactly that, but it's close enough. So that's about this most acceleration force, whatever you want to say, that the rocket experiences could be around 8, maybe 10 newtons, which isn't very much. And wood glue is definitely strong enough to take that kind of abuse. This rocket is designed to use motors that are in the mid-teens. So the Estes Black Powder motors in the 29 millimeter size, they put out at peak thrust something like 15, 16 newtons, which wood glue is fine with that. Composite, on the other hand, I told you 29 millimeter. I have a 29 millimeter casing. The biggest that I can fly, not being high power certified, is an 80, a G80. That's significantly more thrust. It's about 10 times more, and that's enough that the thrust could rip the rocket apart. So we're going to need better glue, and so wood glue, yeah, we're going to use it a little bit. One glue that we have been using is crazy glue. Again, that's not something that you should use if you are not a grown-up. It's quite strong, but it is also very unforgiving. It sets up incredibly quickly. So while this certainly has its uses, it's not something we're going to use today. Plastic cement, not helpful at all. The other thing, too, is that we're going to be gluing from plastic to wood. So gluing between those different media, the wood glue wouldn't work too well anyway. So what we're going to end up using is epoxy. It's if you've never worked with it before, it's made out of 2 different materials. You need to mix them together, and they make a very strong bond. So this stuff eventually, yeah, we're going to have to use quite a bit. Anyway, before we get there, here are the instructions. There's an absolute ton of stuff in here. I have gone through, 2, 4, 6, 7 sheets of balsa, sanding at least a bit, and cutting them out. The first thing that we need to do, according to the instructions here, is we are going to start constructing the fins. We're looking at this quick little image here. These fins are plastic, but these 2 are going to be made out of our laminated balsa. So I'm going to get some wax paper to work with because we're going to need this. So here's how this is going to work. The fin looks like this. Notice that it's got this bit right here. This is going to go, and this goes in here. I'm going to have to cut that out later, not right now. But this is going to be a through the tube style construction, which is nice because it's going to make it strong. But on top, we are going to have to build on the lamination here. So it should look something like this. So there's going to be a top and a bottom, each like this, to strengthen the whole thing. Now, I haven't processed these on the side. In looking at how they fit together, you'll notice there's a burr on either of those sides. So I do need to sand. I don't need to sand all the sides down, but a little bit, just to make sure that when I put these things together, it's a nice, smooth junction point. So there's a piece of sandpaper going to stack things up like this. And oh, make an awful sound. Sorry. Ooh, that's bad. Oh, yes. Hopefully that goes away pretty soon. All right. Goal here is just to get those burrs off. I don't need to do much more than that. And I can see there's still a little bit on this side. That's pretty good. I'm going to quickly take off the burrs on each face of this. Almost. Basically, once you've sanded it, and the sanding starts going from the dark color where the laser cut in order over to the white wood, then you know you're probably far enough along. See, there's dark sanding right there. So that's the wood that the laser burned through. And I'm not looking for perfection here. I don't need to. Ooh, there's a little more squeakiness. Sorry. All right, that stack's done. Let's take care of this stack quickly as well. Now this one, I'm not going to sand this face because there's a bit of a notch in it. I'm not entirely sure why there is one, but I'm just going to avoid that face because I don't want to sand through that notch. I'm just trying to get these to line up nicely when I glue them together. So I think in the next video, if you haven't seen a composite motor before, I think I'm going to, or a 29mm motor at all, because they're not super common, especially if you spend most of your time working on models. That would be 18mm size. That's pretty good. They're surprisingly large. So anyway, back to business then. There's the base, and I'm going to take one piece from each of these sets. Oh, see there, the notch is right here. So that's going to line up like so. And then this piece goes in like this, and now I've got a better gap here. There's actually, when I sanded it, this was kind of bound to happen. I don't really have I have a little bit of a gap in at the top and the bottom. That's going to end up, well, it might make a difference, but once the beveling happens, it's not going to be too big a deal. So anyway, this is actually, each side of it is going to get these, so there's 4 pieces of balsa that we're going to glue on the top and the bottom of each one. And there are 4 fins this shape, and there are 4 fins, this is the back fin, and there are 4 fins that are shaped a different way. So there are going to be 8 total fins that are going to get this treatment. You know what, I think I'm actually going to switch over. I got myself a new bottle of glue, and this still has the original applicator, which is wider, like so. So I'm going to brush it on like so. And I'm going to, you could certainly use your finger to spread this out, but I'm going to use a dowel, piece of balsa scrap here. Thinner would be better. The excess glue, anything that you have on there beyond the minimum, it's going to have to dry. So I probably actually have too much here. So I'm going to try to spread this a little bit thinner. Yeah, that's pretty good. All right. Let's actually mop some of this up. Good. Now, I'm not going to worry too much about the usual 2 layers of glue here. This is not really necessary. One thing I am going to do, and I might as well do it now, is I'm going to get my ruler out. I'm going to use my ruler here as an edge against which to to line this stuff up. I think my ruler is thick enough. Not quite. Yeah, it should be all right. Anyway, I'm going to get both of these pieces on here, and I very much want to make sure that they are lined up as closely as possible to each other and to the edges. You see they're kind of drifting a little bit. Yeah. All right. So once I have them in the right place, I'm just going to kind of, I'm going to try to hold them in place just for a little bit. That looks pretty good. And you definitely want to be checking the corners of this. They give you a pretty good indication as to whether or not you are doing this correctly. I want this to, it doesn't need to be completely set before I flip it over. In fact, it probably shouldn't be. But it should be more or less, it should be pretty tacky. All right. Carefully detach things. Oh, yeah, look at that. This is peeling quite a bit. Now, part of that should be addressed here by flipping it over and having some weight on it. But the real problem here is that in order to make a good lamination here, we need to put a decent amount of weight on this. And the wetness in the glue, the moisture in the glue, will cause the wood to peel like this. And if you watch the video I did on the cluster rocket that we built, the trident or whatever it was, getting that a little wet when I did the finishing step was enough to cause the wood to bow. And this is the exact same problem. I've used enough glue here so that it's causing the wood to warp, which is why we want to do this both sides in the same outing, so that the glue is kind of, the fact that it's wet on both sides should kind of balance things out. The fact that it's wet on one side should be counteracted by the fact that it's wet on the other side as well. However, all that being said, I'm only going to do one of these on camera for, well, the main reason being, how many do you really need to see me do? I mean, they're basically all the same. Anyway, but in between here, I'm only going to build one at a time, even in real time. And in between, once I have everything like lined up right, which I almost do, I'm going to put enough weight on it. Anyway, I'm going to put the wax paper on top of this, and then I'm going to put some heavy stuff on top of that. So, and I have, here's some talcum powder that I use for parachutes. That's pretty heavy. I think that's probably going to be my number one weight. Now, I really do want this as lined up as possible. I want this to look good on the first try. However, if I don't quite get this perfect, the good news is that I am going to do a lot of sanding work on these fins after they're created. And that actually will take care of a couple other problems. Like, I suspect that, there's a couple little spots of glue here that I'm not thrilled with. That have to be sanded off. But all this stuff is going to be kind of a non-issue because of how much work I need to do to finish cleaning this up. Also, any gaps in this, like there's a gap there, that I can plug. I'm going to work on fixing that in between stages here. But in any event, that's probably pretty good. I'm going to put my weight on it, and that's probably as much as I'm going to get done in this first video. In between now and the next one, I'm going to build the 7 remaining fins, which certainly take a while, and make sure that they are squish it down nicely. Yeah, that should do it. All right, so thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.